IVM. Hello and welcome. You're listening to the first ever recording of Mr and Mrs Binge-Watch. I'm the Mrs, aka Janice Sequeira.
And I'm Mr. Aniruddha Guha.
Okay, Ani, this is our first ever recording. What are we here to do? What is our show about? What is Mr and Mrs Binge-Watch about?
Right, Mr. and Mrs Binge-Watch. So here's the thing, right? So Janice and I have been together for a little bit over 7 years. And we've been living together for the good part of those 7 years. And the one thing that we realized about each other over time is that we are both voracious TV watchers. To an extent that we would rather be sitting home watching TV than socializing with friends, family or anybody else. We are that anti-social couple that would rather stay in and binge watch a Netflix show over having dinner with friends.
Especially if that shows a true crime or a procedural. Then to bhai, you can forget about us. We ain't hanging out with humans.
Yeah, phones switched off, our 3 cats wrapped up around us and... the AC on and us watching the show, right?
Yeah.
So our ideal Sunday essentially involves us staying in bed, sharing a large blanket with our 3 cats and binge watching a show. So it made sense for us to do a podcast about our TV habits, right? What we are currently watching and essentially talk about TV we love, right?
Yeah. I mean, see, here's the thing, right? When we started dating 7 years ago, I wasn't an avid TV watcher. For me, TV was largely whatever Star World and Z Cafe was dishing out on weekends or weekdays, which meant, of course, that Shonda Rhimes and Grey's Anatomy and Scandal and stuff like that had a big role in my life. But Aniruddha, of course, has always been a big TV geek.
Well, growing up, I think I was watching the same stuff you were. The stuff that was on Star World or a Z Cafe or Friends, Seinfeld, Ally McBeal, the regular stuff. I think it was around 2008 when I essentially found the world of torrents. And I discovered the first couple of seasons of The West Wing. And I discovered Heroes and I discovered Sopranos. The Wire. And I think that is where the interest in television really, really began, where TV became more than just something to while your time away with, to a point that I think that's what led to my reading habit going for a toss. Because essentially I realized that I could get the kind of stimulation that I needed from books. That intellectual stimulation was also available through stories on TV.
Right.
And essentially that's when I think my real TV habits came into play. But I think with us, when we met in 2012, and the fact that we moved in with each other within 6 months of dating, that happened.
Yeah, very, very quickly. And here's the weird thing, right? Generally, most couples who move in together, I mean, maybe they're out of towners, or maybe it's because, they don't have enough freedom at home to be together. So, there are multiple other reasons which kind of are connected to family, to where you live, to where you're from, which end up end up contributing to the entire live-in situation. With Aniruddha and me, we are both kids from Bombay. Our parents live in the suburbs and we had no lack of freedom at home. I think the only reason we moved in together as quickly as we did was because we just wanted to be together.
And we had 2 set of really cool parents. To the point where when I first told my mom that I was moving in with Janice, the only question she asked was, do I get the room?
And I don't think my mother realized that I had moved out for at least a good 10 to 15 days. It's kind of like I went back home and I said, I need more clothes. And she's like, are you coming back? And I said, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that was pretty cool how they completely warmed up to the idea of the 2 of us living together. And I think that's when our TV watching, I think for the first time I realized that I could really share my likes and dislikes with another person, because I think at that time it had to do with me getting to know you. So TV became like that thing a couple does to get to know each other. But I think now over a period of time, I know it will sound really cheesy, but I think it's reached a point where I can't imagine starting a new show without you, right?
Aww.
Because we have that whole thing, right? You go away for work for a few days and there is a new show that's come out and, we have that conversation on the phone where it's like, okay, fine, I'm coming back in 5 days and then we're going to start watching it. I think now apart from those certain shows that only I watch and which I know you have no interest in, and certain shows that only you watch and I have just absolutely no interest in, I think the joy of watching TV has also got to do with the fact that chances are the two of us are going to end up discussing it at length after watching an episode or watching a show.
Yeah, in fact, on a later episode, Aniruddha and I are going to go deep into our weird TV quirks. But, I want to go back to this time when we hadn't moved in together and, we were getting really close and we were sort of falling in love. And I remember you used to talk to me till very late at night and still probably not sleep all night because you were watching TV shows. Right?
Yeah, my sleeping habits are messed up. Is that what you're trying to tell me? We talk about this every day.
So I'm saying I had an inkling of how much you loved TV and how much you loved all those, shows that you were discovering, whether it's Sopranos, Wire, Heroes, etc. But I think I realized the extent of it only when we moved in together.
Because you saw my, well, it would sound wrong, but you saw my hard drive. Which is full of the shows that I had basically downloaded and never watched till that point.
Yeah, oh my God, you guys. So Aniruddha had these hard drives, which now I feel funny saying hard drives.
Yeah, well, I still have a hard drive.
Okay, but so he had these hard drives. Everyone has hard drives, right?
Janice, okay, now you're not talking about hard drives anymore.
Okay, no, but I'm just saying I remember being so amazed that your hard drives were full of these shows and everything was alphabetically catalogued. Inside that, all episode names were named right down to the T, exactly identically except for the number of the episode. And I was just like, who is this guy? Is this how he's going to be like to live with?
Yeah.
Like, am I going to have to arrange my clothes properly? Am I going to have to keep the house really tidy because that's what he wants?
Yeah, well, it's an OCD that I'm glad to live without anymore because we thankfully live in a world where everything is streamed. And I do not need to catalog stuff. I do miss my cataloging days, I won't lie.
Yeah, he used to spend hours, you guys. And how can we talk about your cataloging and not talk about that TV screen that you had or that computer screen that you had?
That computer screen that you refer to is essentially a Samsung TFT screen.
Whatever that means.
A 22-inch monitor that I brought home in 2008 and something I was very proud of because that was essentially, stop laughing about it, we still have it at home, by the way, and Janice, it tries every week to make sure that I somehow get rid of it.
Yeah, because how much money have we spent on it?
It's old, Janice. It requires maintenance.
Your sentiments are costing us way too much money.
Yeah, so I think you're right about the fact that that at that point of time when I met you, I probably had this entire to-do list of shows to watch, which still exists because at the rate that TV shows are being produced today, when you knock off a list, you realize that there is another new set of great TV shows to watch. And I think even today in this episode, I think we should talk about, I know it might seem really boring and blasé to some people for us to talk about slightly older shows and maybe not something they are watching right now. But there were certain shows that I've always wanted to watch. And then when I met you and we started discovering those shows together and watching them together, essentially shows which were really cool in 2012 and shows that both you and I started watching together and, sort of cherished and discovered at the same time.
And of course, in October 2014 is when, that TV watching habit, which we started around 2012 together, really hit its peak, right?
There's a reason, guys, we are not like people who are finicky about dates. We are not Subodh from Dil Chahta Hai. The reason we know October 2014 is because it was the month when both Janice and I essentially quit our day jobs and turned freelancer. And before we did that, before we went into the entire sort of jumped back into work, we took this month off like we used to do back in college or school where you got summer vacations. We brought our first cat home, who was a kitten at that point of time.
If you want to see pictures of Audrey, go to my Instagram account.
And we were these two essentially excited 20-somethings who had... that month was extremely crucial to us because it marked a change in our lives where we went from, whether professionally or the fact that we turned cat parents, which is, I think, had a huge impact on us as people.
Right.
And the third thing that happened was that essentially Janice and I just sat all day and binge watch TV shows for almost a whole month.
So I want to paint this visual picture, right? This is what Aniruddha and I did pretty much throughout October 2014. AC, full blast, blanket.
Because it's October in Bombay.
Our cat baby Audrey in between the two of us. Lots of junk food. I mean, I think Zomato and Swiggy were very happy with us. That man, Swiggy was there, but Zomato definitely was very happy with us.
That came to bite us for our wedding photographs later.
Yeah, but we ordered like a shit ton of food. And of course, our TV was permanently on because we were binge watching one show after another. So since this is our first episode, Aniruddha and I wanted to discuss some of the shows that are special to us. Shows that we first discovered together as a couple. Shows like Homeland, The Walking Dead, Good Wife, Entourage. And so that's what we're going to talk about on the other side of this break.
Sachin Tendulkar, Virat Kohli, Don Bradman, and now Cyrus Brocha. Okay, probably not in the right company. I mean, Don Bradman is Australian. But it's called Cyrus Says, a wonderful show about everything. Find the show on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome back. You're still listening to Mr and Mrs Binge-Watch. Now, before we took a break, we told you that Ani and I would be talking about some of our favorite shows that we discovered together as a couple. The first show that we want to talk about is a show that's been our all-time favorite. It probably ranks in our top 5 shows, maybe. It's called The Good Wife. And, of course, all episodes are now out on Netflix. But when we were watching it, we had to download and watch.
Yeah, see, look, like I said before the break as well, some of the shows we might be talking about today might be shows that you may have already watched, or shows that have, sort of may not seem as relevant today. But these shows are important to us because we sort of got to know each other over these shows. And secondly, some of these shows, still hold water among the current programming. So The Good Wife, for example, was a show that aired on a network, which means that this was something in the pre-Netflix streaming digital cable era. And, it's probably the kind of show that I would never watch. A, it's called The Good Wife. B, it's about a female protagonist whose husband has just been caught in a sex scandal. Now, when you put those two aspects together, you think that this is a kind of a soapy sort of
VP drama,
the kinds that I wouldn't watch. But I think the beauty of The Good Wife is that it is not just about that. In fact, recently I was reading an article which said that there are certain shows whose titles didn't do them great service, and The Good Wife is absolutely one of them, although I disagree because over time I have come to love the title. Essentially, The Good Wife opens with Alicia Florrick, who's our female protagonist. She's a sort of a middle-aged housewife who's married to the district attorney of Chicago, who is then caught in a sex scandal and imprisoned for bribery and corruption, which means that Alicia now needs to go back and has to stand up on her 2 feet as a lawyer once again. So she resumes practice after a massive long break and realizes that the profession isn't what it was when she first left it. So she's reintroduced into the career through sort of an ex-flame lover, whatever you want to call him, called Will Gardner, which was played by Josh... I can't remember his full name right now. So essentially, Will Gardner runs this law firm along with Dan Lockhart, played by the absolutely fantastic Christine Baranski. And they give Alicia this one shot at redemption. But she has to now compete against younger lawyers than her. Like this guy called Carrie, who's this up-and-coming lawyer who'll stop at nothing. And, sort of comes across new characters, new people, befriends somebody like the investigator who works at the law firm called Kalinda, played by Archie Punjabi. And essentially, this is merely the setup of the first few episodes. But the more you watch the show and the layers sort of peel off, you realize that The Good Wife is not just about a woman seeking redemption, but over a period of time, it makes a statement about the American justice the justice system, about freedom of speech, about several themes that affect day-to-day American lives. And I think that was the beauty of the show, that it managed to do that through an essentially very simple plot.
Yeah, the thing is that going into the show, like you said, because the show was called The Good Wife and the first episode was all this VP family drama that was happening, we didn't realize that it was actually not a family drama show at all. It's actually a full-blown courtroom drama. And over a period of time, that's what became the most appealing part of the show. Like, I knew nothing about the American legal system or justice system, and this was probably the first courtroom drama show that I'd watched. And it was so interesting the way Alicia Flockhart and Carrie and Diane Lockhart and Will Gardner and Kalinda would find all these really cool loopholes within the justice system to save their clients. I mean, didn't that become a recurring theme, Aniruddha? Like, you'd feel like, this says no way Alicia Florrick is winning this case, and yet in walks Kalinda at the nth hour with some new proof, with some new photographs, with some new information, and suddenly they found a loophole and a way to rescue their client. That became so interesting. In addition to that, of course, it's also the characters, because on one hand, yes, the courtroom drama is fascinating, the courtroom drama is exciting, but there's also the characters and their relationships. Like, for example, Kalinda and Alicia's friendship. The drink that they would have together after every case. Or Carrie and Alicia competing with each other and eventually realizing that, listen, we're in this together, we've actually got to have each other's back. Or Alicia and Will's romance.
Right.
So all that politics, the drama around it, the fact that her husband was still in prison, played by the fabulous Chris North, someone who all of us Sex and the City fans love. He was Mr. Big, you guys.
Another hard disk reference.
Oh God, no. I'm just basically saying that the show was so much more than what it originally set out to be, and it's one of those shows that also sort of got better with time. First season was really good, but second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, I think right till the very end, the show sort of, maintains, it manages to hold your attention. You're not bored. You're not like, kya ho raha hai yaar? We watch a lot of shows where we kind of go like, after the fifth or sixth season, we're like, what are you doing with these characters? Game of Thrones, we're talking about you. But I'm just saying that you look at a lot of these shows and you're just like, why are you ruining this character's arc? Why are you making them do something that they would never do?
Just for the sake of continuing the story.
Correct. But that rarely happened. I mean, this is not a spoiler because Ani and I have a rule. Anything that's over 5 seasons and has been there out for a few years, you can talk about the spoilers.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that when a character is no longer important to the plot, they didn't think twice about killing the character off. This is way before Game of Thrones, you guys. Right? They were just doing it because they didn't feel like he served a purpose anymore.
Yeah. Also, given the genre, the death felt so organic, but I know right now it's not making sense to some of you who have not watched it, and I had a bit of a brain freeze earlier. Will Gardner is played by Josh Charles. I should not have forgotten it because Josh Charles was also the lead on a show I love, Sports Night, which was created by Aaron Sorkin. But I just want to go back to what you were talking about. So all the show was created by the duo Michelle and Robert King, and these two had, I feel, one of the best team of writers that we've seen on a network show over the last couple of decades. Because just like you rightly pointed out, at that point of time when the show came out, there were typically 2 kinds of shows. One was the procedural, which essentially had your case of the week, and you went from one week to the other solving those cases.
You're talking like a Law and Order Special Victims Unit.
Right.
Correct. Those kind of shows. Yeah.
Right. And of course, there were dramas which had sort of overarching season arcs and, which essentially which had central plot lines. What Good Wife did brilliantly, and I think it's a textbook in TV writing, and I don't think too many shows after that have been able to replicate that aspect of the show, is the way it combined the central plot of each season with the episodic storylines that it took in terms of the court cases they went into.
Exactly.
So they found a way to weave in those court cases into the central plot, and they did it in a manner that was so organic that, in a sense, and that's also what made it so watchable and rewatchable, is that even when for a moment if you felt that you were not really invested into the central plot lines of the characters, the court cases were always fantastic.
Exactly. See, that's what I mean, right? That's the tricky thing where you're looking forward to the next episode because you want to see what this law firm, what case they're going to get and how they're going to deal with it. At the same time, you're also looking forward to what's happening in your main characters, what's happening in their lives, their romances, their friendships, the politics within the firm. I mean, the firm itself, over a period of 7 seasons, the number of cool characters that the firm has had.
Yeah.
I mean, they're each, you look at each of them and there's been one standout moment that they've had.
Yeah, including the character they introduced in the 7th season played by Kash Jumbo, who went on to get the lead billing in the spin-off of the show called The Good Fight, which is another fantastic show that Janice and I can just completely keep waxing eloquent about. Oh, but we'll probably take that show up another time when one of the new seasons come out. But coming back to Good Wife, you spoke about these characters who keep getting introduced. And I think there's a character that you and I have completely forgotten about. And that's the character of Eli Gold. Played by none other than the great Alan Cumming. And it was this character that was probably introduced, I don't remember, at the end of season 1 or in the middle of season 2, was one of those, sort of secondary characters who was just meant to be part of the show because, he was forwarding a certain track.
Right.
But Eli Gold, over a period of time, they wrote just such, great episodes revolving around him that I think from the 3rd or the 4th season onwards, he became integral to the fabric of the show. I mean, you could not imagine watching a Good Wife episode without Eli Gold, right?
And for those of you who love Jeffrey Dean Morgan like I do, I mean, ladies, he's there all across, I think, the 6th and 7th season. And you're really rooting for his and Alicia's romance at one point in time. So I'm just saying that the show, it starts off with these 4 to 5 characters you fall in love with. And over a period of time, they introduce more characters. They introduce a whole lot of interpersonal relationships. They introduce such kick-ass cases. I mean, we have seen Alicia Florrick. There's this one case that keeps coming back every season. This one murderer who keeps coming back every season, and literally every time they know he's guilty, and yet somehow or the other the firm finds a way to rescue him. The loopholes that they use, the investigation that they conduct. One of the biggest heartbreaking moments for me, for example, was when Kalinda left the show because she was so integral to all of these loopholes, right?
Yeah. But I think,
by the way, shout out to Kanis Surka, who looks a lot like Kalinda, looks a lot
Punjabi.
like Archie Punjabi.
Right, doppelganger alert.
7 people across the planet, people.
But yeah, I think what really made The Good Wife tick, and I think it's one of the last of the great American network shows. What really made it tick was that it was a combination of some really fascinating characters with some excellent episodic plot lines, which were extremely well researched. So they dipped into a lot of real life court cases to make the show seem as authentic as possible. Great acting, and the writing never dipped. So The Good Wife might seem like a more traditional show in the current landscape, but as far as classics go, as Janice pointed out, it's clearly among our most favorite shows.
Yeah.
All episodes and all seasons of the show are out on Netflix. If you've watched them, it's the ideal time to go back and rewatch and binge watch some of those episodes. And if you've not watched them, trust me, you're in for a treat. All episodes out on Netflix. And what's the next show we are talking about, Janice?
So continuing the conversation about the shows that Aniruddha and I first discovered together when we started dating. So think years like 2012, 13, 14. The next show we want to talk to you guys about is Entourage. Okay, now I'm not sure how many women have watched this show, but I know this much or enjoyed it. But I know this much that dudes have watched it and loved it. I mean, this is that quintessential dude show, right? Because what's Entourage about? Entourage is essentially about Vince, who is an up-and-coming star, or at least who moves to LA to become a star, and he moves with his 3 best friends. So there's E, who goes on to be his manager and of course is his best friend. There's his brother Johnny Drama, who's also a struggling actor and who eventually, because he has no other career choice and nothing is working, ends up becoming Vince's chef. And there's of course Turtle, who for the longest time had absolutely no career prospects, eventually goes on to become an entrepreneur, and for a large part of the seasons is just Vince's driver.
He starts a tequila company, doesn't he?
He starts a tequila company.
A limousine company.
Like Turtle had game, bro.
Turtle essentially was the underdog in the first episode who actually went on to achieve a lot more than some of the other guys in the group.
Yeah, definitely more than E and Johnny Drama, though of course. But that's what the setup of Entourage is about, right? So Entourage is about these 4 guys. They move from Queens to LA and they're sort of, trying to make it big in the big bad world of Hollywood. And the show, what I found out really, just a couple of years ago, was that the show was actually based on Mark Wahlberg's life, or at least the starting point was where Mark Wahlberg and his friends moving. So that was where the germ of the idea was born.
Each of the characters is actually based on one of Mark Wahlberg's friends. So there was an actual E, there was a Turtle, there was a Johnny Drama. They may not be identical to the characters that we eventually see, but they were based on versions. They were versions of real life people.
So what I want to actually talk about before we talk about Entourage is how Ani and I discovered it, right? So Entourage is possibly, at least in my memory, one of the first few shows I remember very clearly watching with Aniruddha. This is how it happened. He'd been telling me for a really long time that, there's this show that you need to watch. Very short episodes, hardly 20, 25-minute episodes. Watch one, you're going to love it. In my head, Entourage was always a dude show, right? A show with show for guys. It's about guys having fun. I watched one episode and I was hooked. Next thing I know, I'm thinking I'm going to have to watch all 8 seasons all by myself because Mr. Guha here has finished watching all of it. He watched all 8 seasons of the show with me all over again. Not just that, he also downloaded the show all over again for me. Matlab, 8 seasons of a show, if a guy agrees to watch that all over again with you, clearly he's into you. Huh, Ani? That's why you watched it, right?
Yeah, but how
because
do you know?
You loved me.
Yeah, absolutely. I was totally and madly in love with you, and not because Entourage is an entirely rewatchable show. But
your voice is saying something, but your face right now is saying something else.
Yeah, but I think I mean, keeping that mushiness aside, Janice, which makes me very uncomfortable. What was great about Entourage, and which I realized when I rewatched it with you, was actually how enduring the show was. There aren't too many shows that you'll want to rewatch or revisit, but there are certain shows that have that quality, right? We do go back and watch Friends. We do go back and watch Seinfeld episodes. But what set Entourage slightly apart from these shows is that because those were sitcoms having those episodic storylines, Entourage always had a very interesting plot line in each season.
Yeah.
So while it was a show about, like you said, these dudes who were sort of not entirely intellectually stimulating characters.
You're being polite. They weren't intellectually stimulated at all. They just all they cared about was getting laid, attending the big party, drinking, smoking up, and big cars and fancy night outs.
Yeah, but I think what Entourage managed to do increasingly with each season was that the storylines improved. For example, there is an entire section around the 4th or 5th season where after Vince has tasted success as a superstar, him and E decide to turn producers, and they decide to produce a film called Medellin, which, as we found out at that point of time, was based on Pablo Escobar's life. Now, this is in the pre-Narcos era. So what Entourage does, there are 2 things that Entourage had which were not existing sort of movies. One was it told the story of Pablo Escobar in a story within a story kind of a setup. And there was a point where Vince also plays Aquaman.
Yeah, it was almost like predicting the superhero generation before the superheroes became big.
It predicted one of the greatest TV shows of all time and one of the biggest money spinners at the box office way in advance. And I think that's what really made Entourage tick, that it had its pulse on the Hollywood movie business.
Right.
It knew, like you said, because it was based on Mark Wahlberg's life, because he was involved creatively, he was one of the executive producers. It's the rare show that is based in Hollywood and is about Hollywood and gets a lot of Hollywoodisms, so to speak, right.
A big part of that, to be honest, though, also getting that Hollywoodism right is our favorite character, Mr. Ari Gold.
Yeah, Jeremy Piven fan for life. Ari Gold, I mean, what do I say? Eli Gold in The Good Wife, Ari Gold in Entourage.
Gold is a good surname for television characters.
All these characters who are written as sort of slightly secondary, slightly comic relief kind of characters, and when they take over the storytelling or when they become the most important characters of a show, those characters always have the best arcs.
Right.
They always have the best writing. I mean, Ari Gold is the most quotable character after Neil Patrick Harris in How I Met Your Mother. I keep going back to the video of which is on YouTube of him essentially taking back his talent management agency from, by the way, Clockwork Orange fans, a character played by Malcolm McDowell, who essentially throws him out of his own agency. And when Ari takes it back, he enters the agency building with what else but a paintball gun in his hand, randomly shooting at employees and firing them, sort of giving that great line, return to the king or exile forever. These are TV moments which I think will be imprinted, especially in your and my minds, because these are special shows to us. But I just want to ask you something. What was also interesting about me rewatching Entourage with you specifically, Janice, is that, like you said, it's essentially a show about men who are extremely, or at some point or the other, display misogyny. And I am not so sure if a show like Entourage would ever exist in the current climate. I think there are certain shows which only belong to the certain era that they come from. For example, I think Friends, which has lately received a lot of criticism.
Yeah, for not having diversity.
Not having a major black character till almost the 6th or 7th season, or an Entourage, which sort of has that bent of misogyny, are shows that belong to a certain era and wouldn't really, sort of be looked upon as great entertainment now. But I was really curious to know what you felt about the male characters back then.
See, I think going into the show, because also I knew so much about the show before I'd even watched it, right? I might not have watched the show, but I knew that it was about 4 guys who were trying to make it big in Hollywood. So here's the thing, right? You're always looking at what the intent of the character is. I think also when I was discovering the show in 2012, I don't think I had the wherewithal to look at it from any kind of prism of gender, or, whether they're sort of, writing these sexual narratives to titillate me or for the sake of it. But I think over a period of time, I realized that this is just how the characters are. It's written in a very matter-of-fact way. If you're an up-and-coming Hollywood star and you're getting so much attention from the ladies and your best friends are trying to sort of capitalize on that, it was written in that very matter-of-fact factor, right? It wasn't written in a way to titillate the audience. Like, there weren't sex scenes for the sake of having a sex scene to try and titillate the audience in any particular way. It was just that, hey, Vince was getting laid a lot, and so there were sex scenes. Hey, these guys were going to parties every night where there were hot women, and so there were hot women.
Right.
I don't think at any point of time I felt like, oh, this is just, being said to create a particular effect. Is the show sexist? Of course, without a doubt. I think if we go back and watch even some of the episodes now, you'll probably wonder why a lot of the women are being used as props.
Yeah, and but I don't know. I don't know if we have that realization. I think new audiences might have it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So this is the show got over in 2011, right? This is way before all of us were discussing gender issues to the extent that we're discussing it now.
Right.
This is way before we're talking about how women and how different cultures and races need to be represented in shows. So I think over a period of time, as we've evolved, as the audience has evolved, as writers, as directors, as producers have evolved, so has television, right? So today when we watch a show, of course, we're looking to see that, is the character playing a certain race because there is requirement for that race, or are they
and it is subconscious. Neutral? It's not even like we are thinking about it.
Yeah, but we would find it odd, for example, if we saw an all-white show and there's not a single person.
Yeah, unless they're trying to make a point about it.
Correct. So I'm saying at that point of time in 2012, 2013, when we were watching this show, in my head, I knew that it was a dude show. My only thing is that, were they writing all of these lines and were they using women as props because that they wanted to create some kind of a statement, or was it purely because that is what these boys in their lives were like? And even if I watch it now, to a large extent, I can understand the misogyny and the sexism. Maybe, of course, in hindsight, if they made the show today, they would have fixed a lot of things. But no, I mean, the gaze was sort of very male, but not in a way that titillated the audience.
Right. Although, I mean, I do agree with you. I think, apart from a lot of other things evolving over time, like our awareness about certain issues, what has actually evolved also is the storytelling in general.
Yeah.
So I do believe that Entourage is a show that very firmly belongs to the decade that it was created in. And I'm not so sure how new viewers would respond to it, but as an Entourage fan myself, when I rewatch episodes, like we rewatched some episodes last month or a few months ago because we didn't have anything else to watch, or when we watched the film. So the Entourage also had a movie that came out after 8 seasons about a couple of years ago. It didn't do too well. So Janice and I had never really watched it because we just felt that it would be shit.
Yeah, because way too many people told us that unless you want to, erase every good memory of the show, don't watch the film.
Yeah, and we ended up watching it and we didn't really hate it. I mean, because I don't think we went in expecting it to be this really great film. The movie reflects everything that was good and not good about the show itself. But I would be really curious to know how new viewers would react to it. But as far as I'm concerned, Entourage is easily one of those memorable shows that you and I discovered together and really had a great time watching it.
Yeah. In fact, one of the characters we've not spoken about, but who has a big role in the movie, and we were so happy. Of course, Ari Gold gets a much bigger role in the film, by the way, you guys. But so does Lloyd. Everyone remembers Lloyd, right? Ari Gold's assistant. His little whipping boy starts off as his whipping boy. Eventually, towards the last few seasons, starts giving it back. And in the movie, though, pretty much takes it to another level.
No, but even there, for example, he was a homosexual character who was always at the butt of Ari's jokes.
Yeah, Ari was shown as really homophobic.
Yeah, so I mean, when you think about it, there are every reasons for us to not find Ari endearing. But they still managed to do it. Maybe it was Jeremy Piven, maybe it was those throwaway lines.
I think it's just because he played his character like someone who didn't give a
Yeah, I think he was very honest to his portrayal. So Entourage, definitely extremely fun show, guys. If you've not watched it yet, we would at least recommend you catch at least the first season on Hotstar. The remaining seasons are out there as well. If you enjoy it, please continue watching. And on the other side of this break, Janice and I will talk about a couple more shows that we sort of discovered together when we first started going out.
A couple more shows that we discovered together as a couple.
Stay
See you on
tuned.
the other side.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another incredible week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you are not following us on social media, please make sure you do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. A couple of messages up top. First, we're hiring right now. We're looking to hire a producer, we're looking to hire copywriters, we're looking to hire an audio engineer, we're looking for web developers, we're looking for business people. If you're looking to work at IVM, which in my opinion is probably one of the best places to work at, then please do send us an application. Also, please do download our app if you're not listening to it on our app. Our app is available on the Play Store. And I also want to thank our sponsors this month, Savari, Storytel, and Paytm Money. Thank you very much for supporting us. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus is joined by Mayank Shekhar, film critic and editorial head of Midday Entertainment. They talk about their memories from St. Xavier's prom nights, Mayank's very first encounter with Cyrus, the recently concluded elections, and Mayank's process of writing. On the Filter Coffee podcast, Ronnie Screwwala joins Karthik Nagarajan to talk about his early days as an entrepreneur and what has kept him going during adversities. And if that's not enough Ronnie Screwwala for you, listen to his podcast, the Ronnie Screwwala Podcast, where Ronnie talks to me about the benefits and disadvantages of being an outsider, building a brand identity, and the learnings from collaborating with business giants across the world. On Business.next, Govindraj Athiraj is joined by author Jason Jennings. They talk about the key ingredients that are crucial in building a high-speed economy. On Geek Fruit, Tejas, Alika, and special guest Ishan Krishna of Bhayanak Moth go down nostalgia lane and discuss the world of Pokemon, including the newly released Pokemon Detective Pikachu. On Simplified, Chuck, Naren, and Shriketh discuss the origins of the Yeti, Loch Ness Monsters, Bigfoot, and other cryptic creatures. On States of Anarchy, Hamsani's guest is Benjamin Katzer-Silverstein. He's from the Foreign Policy Research Institute, and he busts myths about the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And with that, let's get you on with your show.
Welcome back. You're still listening to Mr and Mrs Binge-Watch. And the next show Aniruddha and I are going to talk about is a favorite with television lovers everywhere. It's called Homeland.
Right. So Homeland is essentially a show which I think managed to portray the post 9/11 America in a really interesting manner.
Yeah.
I think at that point of time, there were action thrillers like 24 being made, which sort of dabbled in terrorists as antagonists. But I think Homeland really took it to another level. The first couple or the first 3 seasons of the show were based on this Israeli series called Hatufim.
Right.
And it stayed very true to that storyline for the first few seasons. But I feel over a period of time, Homeland sort of went beyond the original material and sort of took a life of its own. Carrie Mathison, the original, the protagonist of Homeland, became this sort of really enduring character who went on to then, sort of take on newer challenges across seasons. There is this discussion that's happening right now about whether Homeland has already sort of gone past its sell-by date and if it sort of lacks, the charm of when it first came out. But, Janice and I have been constantly watching newer seasons every time thinking that we might not enjoy it. And while, yeah, it might not be as great as it was in the first 3 seasons, it's really still a show that is very watchable.
Yeah. So the first 3 seasons, I mean, it was 2 things, right? One was, of course, like you said, it was dealing with post 9/11 America. It was dealing with Islamophobia. And of course, you had the brilliant Damian Lewis, who played Brody. So, this entire cat and mouse chase between Carrie and Brody. But at the same time, their strange romance, which developed over the first 3 seasons, that was sort of what reeled viewers in, right? So when Brody eventually exits the show, a lot of people felt like, now what is Homeland going to do? So that is where I feel like Homeland decided to get it right, because, a show like that, which is so built on the romance over the first 3 seasons, and then you have one of the main characters exiting the show. After that, to pick up the pieces and then to take it to sort of, a worldwide sort of perspective. Because Aniruddha and I are news junkies, by the way. We sort of like to believe that we're on top of what's happening in the country, what's happening in the world. So Homeland season after season has managed to take Carrie and their entire CIA team to different corners of the world, be it Pakistan, be it Germany, and explore different terrorist cells and different sort of threats from across the world.
Yeah,
this is something that the show,
real world issues.
Yeah, this is something that the show got spot on. So even when a couple of seasons did dip, and this is true, I mean, we also, like fans across the world, sort of felt like, kya kar rahe? Like, are they taking Carrie's madness a little too far? Are they not doing justice to Saul and his character? Of course, we all felt that, but I don't think it's ever come to a point where I've been like, nahi yaar, I can't watch this show anymore. Not for me, at least. Also, quick shout out to Mr. Aniruddha Guha, who, by the way, wrote the Indian adaptation of Hatu Film. It was called Prisoners of War, POW, and it was on Hotstar and Star Plus.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you for that shout out, Janice. That was not planned at all, guys. But yeah, I remember being excited because I think unlike a lot of people, you and I had actually already watched Hatufim, which is the original Israeli version when the show was offered to me. So I really jumped at the opportunity because, I mean, it was just such a, made up of rich characters, great show. And I think it has kind of story that has relevance in different regions of the world.
Of course, because there's a conflict almost in every part of the world today.
Right. So it felt ripe for an Indian remake as well. But I think what Homeland has done well, and I don't think we give it enough credit for that, is that it's managed to reboot year after year in new and interesting ways. So just like you spoke about how, you feel like just when they're taking, so Carrie Matheson, the character, the protagonist, has a bipolar disorder. And every time you feel that they are, pushing that entire character trait a little too far, the writers of Homeland always find an interesting way to, combine that with the story that they're trying to tell at that point of time. Also, Homeland has this excellent ability to pull the rug under your feet from time to time. They beautifully set things up over a specific season, and just when you begin to, sort of buy into it, they just, shock you with, and it never seems forced. It always seems well earned. It always seems organic. So while there are a lot of people that we know have switched off from Homeland over a period of time, at least season 6 and 7, which Janice and I watched, we enjoyed. Season 8 premieres later this year. So we are actually among maybe, I mean, I know that it's a hugely watched show in the US, although it's not something that social media talks about a lot anymore because, there is so much more content that it faces competition from. But you and I will surely be watching it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like saying goodbye to an old friend. And you know what? I mean, personally, I look forward to watching a new season of Homeland every year. So I will actually be kind of sad when the show ends. Of course, our very own Nimrat Kaur is also going to make a reappearance in the final season. So at some point on this podcast, Ani and I are going to deep dive into our favorite moments, favorite characters, and we're going to revisit Homeland. Until then, of course, those of you who haven't caught up with the show, all seasons currently streaming on Hotstar.
And maybe when we do that, when we sort of take a deep dive, if we take a deep dive into Homeland, if we feel that season 8 sort of is up to mark, then maybe we'll talk about some other shows like The Looming Tower, right?
Sure, of course, which are based on actual incidents
which,
as well.
Which I think are the new sort of in shows about similar issues and similar plot lines which
Yeah.
which do things better, for the want of a better word, than say what Homeland did back in the day. So yeah, Homeland, again, one of the shows that Janice and I sort of discovered together. Watched the first 2 seasons of, all episodes out on Hotstar, right, Janice?
On Hotstar. HBO Library is the best investment you ever made, Hotstar. And the last show we're going to talk about on the first episode is a show that actually both Aniruddha and I didn't think we'd become such huge fans of. It's called The Walking Dead. So what's The Walking Dead about, Ani? You want to give us a small glimpse into that?
Listen, I think it's kind of pointless to give out The Walking Dead
Yeah,
synopsis. It's essentially a zombie show. I mean, I know we are doing disservice by saying it's just a zombie show. It's not. But I mean, it's essentially a show about a group of survivors who sort of bandy together after a zombie outbreak. And while that might seem like a very sort of perfunctory plotline now, The Walking Dead, I think, was one of those cool TV shows when it first came out 9 to 10 years ago.
Yeah. And I remember, the thing is for me, I've never been a fan of zombie films, of anything to do with zombies or post-apocalyptic universes. So when we started watching The Walking Dead, I remember initially we were so grossed out with the amount of slashing and blood flying everywhere and body parts just lying around everywhere, skeletons walking. It was just a lot of that in the initial first few seasons, until, of course, like with all great shows, you get invested in the characters.
Also,
but I remember there was a strange point in time where Ani actually woke up one day. I think he had to go out. We were right in the middle of binge watching multiple seasons of the show, and you had to go take some meeting or something in the middle of all that. And what happened then?
Yeah, it was playing on my mind, right? I'd completely forgotten about that. So essentially, we watched The Walking Dead in its 6th season, which I think it was at around the time when the show was peaking. So we actually got into it at the time when the show was gold. And we literally, I think we watched it in that month of October 2014, which I spoke about earlier, where we were home and we were,
Rarely
sort of just
getting out of
and
home.
we were just binge watching. And I remember we watched some 15, 20, 25 episodes over 2-3 days. And I remember coming out after that 3 days, sort of there being darkness all around the house and us just watching gore and like blood spilling
And
all the time and stepping
zombies
out of the
being
house.
slashed.
And it was a little disorienting. I felt like somebody would jump with a machete around the corner and slice me into two. So yeah, it was kind of scary watching. It did kind of play with your mind. I think just like we spoke about Homeland earlier, Walking Dead is a show which is well past its prime. We have to acknowledge that about the show. And unlike a Homeland, it does not even seem to be having any kind of a end game in mind, which Homeland did, which is why we are still invested in Homeland, because we are hoping that even if it's been sort of a rocky, turbulent sort of journey, they'll take us to a great place in the end. Walking Dead just seems like it's not ready to hang up its boots, right?
Yeah, and it's sort of right now in no man's land, because honestly, and without giving away major spoilers, the characters that are still on the show, I'm not sure how invested I am in them. And really, so one of the things that we have to tell you is that The Walking Dead is more than just a zombie show, right? Over a period of time, it is a human drama. It is about how these, few people who are surviving from different communities come together and become this close, tight-knit unit who are always looking out for each other, who are always finding, innovative ways to, kill villains and stay out of danger. But the problem is that now it's at a point where I'm just like, you know what? You had a great thing going for 7 seasons. Now in your 8th and 9th season, even the 8th season, I think, was pretty great, right? I mean, we really enjoyed it. Now, in the second half of the 9th season, I'm just like, what is happening? I don't care much anymore.
I disagree with you slightly. I actually enjoyed the 9th season after 2 years of not really enjoying Walking Dead. So Janice and I are those few loyal viewers of Walking Dead who still watch episodes as they come out right now. I don't know how many of them are left around the world. And while I can acknowledge the fact that The Walking Dead is surely past its prime, put it down to, I don't know, viewer loyalty or just the fact that there is that sentimentality, and the fact that it's special to both Janice and me, that we still continue to watch the new episodes for as long as, till that one day when we'll get up and we'll say, you know what, screw this shit, we're not watching any more Walking Dead.
For those of you who still haven't discovered Walking Dead and are intrigued and interested after listening to this podcast, go on to Netflix. All seasons available over there. But yeah, guys, that pretty much brings brings us to the end of the show. Before I wrap up, Ani, I want to ask you, of the 4 shows that we talked about today, which would you say has sort of aged the best?
Undoubtedly The Good Wife.
Yeah, I agree with you fully. It's still one of those gold shows.
I think The Good Wife, like some of my other favorite shows, whether it's a Mad Men or a Breaking Bad, is the kind of TV show that when I'm one day old and graying, will go back to and want to watch all seasons of. And I am quite certain that I will still enjoy because I genuinely believe that The Good Wife is a classic. And, classics just never ever, stop being entertaining.
So I have
That's
two
such
answers.
a terrible line, right? Classics never stop being entertaining. That's not what classics are meant to be.
Classics never die.
The classics never die. That's a better line. Thank you, Janice, for saving my ass.
I actually have 2 answers. I feel like The Good Wife for sure, because all seasons are gold and the seasons just kept getting better. I also feel like the first 3 seasons of Homeland for me
For sure. Yeah.
will always be special because, Damian Lewis, of course, Claire Danes brings so much to her role, but Damian Lewis in those first 3 seasons, his and Carrie's romance, epic. It's the stuff that, had us hooked, and the fact that I got to watch almost all those 3 seasons together, gold on gold. But that brings us to the end of this podcast, the end of our first ever recording. You think we did all right, Guha?
I think we were okay. Apart from that classics are meant to entertain line, I think we did fine.
Oh, you mean my hard disk joke?
Oh, that's glad. Don't remind me of that, please.
All right, guys. So if you have similar stories of, shows that you discovered with your partner, lover, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, and you want to share those with us, tell us in the comments. If you agree with our views on these shows or if you disagree with our views, tell us that also in the comments.
And next week, we'll hopefully talk about a show that's slightly more current and something Janice and I have recently watched or are watching at the moment. This is Mr and Mrs
Binge-Watch.
Hi, I'm Ronnie Screwella, first-generation entrepreneur and co-founder at Upgrad. My podcast, Dreaming with Your Eyes Open, is a companion podcast to my best-selling book, Dream with Your Eyes Open. On this podcast, I talk to Amit Doshi, founder of IVM Podcast, about my entrepreneurial journey. I walk you through my successes and failures, mostly my failures, and the lessons that I learned from my experiences, family, and colleagues. What was my first entrepreneurial venture? Why I chose Japanese cartoons over animation cartoons on Hangama? Why did I sell my stake at UTV to Disney? Find out all this and more on the Ronnie Screwella podcast, Dreaming with Your Eyes Open. New episodes out every Tuesday on the IVM Podcasts app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Think fast. If I tell you I'm Parsi, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Dhansak. I don't blame you. My name is Perzan Patel. You may know me as the Bavi Bride. Though I run a popular Parsi food blog, the truth is I didn't know anything about Parsi food until I got married. It was just my luck. He turned out to be your typical sadra lega wearing, kawab khari eating Parsi boy. And the only thing I knew was dhansak, or rather, how to eat it. But there's more to Parsi food than dhansak. And there is more to us than our obsession with eggs and our legendary Rani cafes. Welcome to Not Just Dhansak, a fresh new show where I talk to friends, fellow Babas and Parsi entrepreneurs about all things Bhonu, a little bit of history, a dash of Baba madness, and a lot of food talk. There's more to Parsis than meets the eye, and there's certainly more to us than Dhansak. Join me every Tuesday as I talk to some of my favorite Parsis in the food space in India and beyond. I am the Bavi Bride, and this is Not Just Dhansak.